Oh my gosh, where to start? First of all, thanks for the invitation. It's going to be a lot of fun today. I got my start as a student on Voyager back in the 80s at the Uranus encounter. And one of the things that it's easy to say, maybe you even did say it, or it was written somewhere, so it's primitive technology. But one of the
I just said that.
Sorry, okay. One of the things that I think is really important to recognize is that when that spacecraft was assembled in the mid-1970s, it was the cutting edge. It was a combination of two things. It was a combination of the cutting edge technology available at the time and the pragmatic technology that a very conservative space agency would allow you to put onto the spacecraft at that time. So even today, we can't fly 20 megapixel cameras on Mars rovers because they've never flown in space. They're very, very conservative. So one of the lessons is that you always have to push the limits and find the edge of the technology that you can fly, at least if you're working with a very conservative government space agency. And part of that, part of those technological innovations were things that maybe weren't appreciated at the time, but turned out to be absolutely crucial to the mission, like the ability to reprogram the spacecraft. Voyager was the first one that could be reprogrammed. We take it for granted now because we reprogram our cars, right? We didn't even think about it. But the ability to change the code on board, the ability to make the spacecraft behave differently when it's much farther from the sun than when it's closer to the sun, that was absolutely critical.
There were some amazing things that were done to the Voyager craft in that way through software updates. There were hacks to get around memory, cells that had been destroyed by cosmic rays. There were parts of the craft failed mechanically, and so I think in the Neptune encounter there was this very clever way of tilting it so that the camera could pan.
Exactly.
I mean, there was some amazing, and then there was even new compression algorithms that were uploaded to it that didn't exist when it was launched, and allowed it to set more back. What's your favourite? I mean, I've written about this a few times because I just love the idea of the kind of, I think it's called it the long arm of the celestial repair manual, celestial mechanic, if you like. What's your favourite example of these hacks? Because I mean, there are several of them on the Mars rovers as well, aren't there?
Yeah, well, I think Voyager has probably one of my favorites, and that is, out of Neptune, you're talking about sunlight is 1% as bright as sunlight here on the Earth, and a camera system that was designed primarily for a mission at Jupiter and Saturn, much closer to the sun, so you need much longer exposures out in the deep outer solar system. But you take a long exposure, then your image gets blurred because you're flying by at 10 miles per second. And so what they did was they made the camera work with the thrusters and the attitude control system of the spacecraft to do these beautiful pirouettes. So while the shutter was open, they kind of keep this kind of ballet-like dance to allow those beautiful images that you see in the outer solar system. And I don't think they anticipated having to do that. But again, that flexibility was built in for the first time, which was a huge advance. Of course, now every mission since has had that kind of flexibility.
So where do we see the legacy of that in modern? I mean, we did that rovers backwards on Mars because one of the, I think it was more reliable that way. But I mean, where do we see today the manifestation of this ingenuity to reprogram things that began with the Voyager?
I think it's all over the place. I mentioned it's in cars nowadays too, right? But in the space program, it's the idea of needing that flexibility. The whole idea of failure modes, they call it fault tree analysis, the contingencies, what if. It comes down to the fact that these things are hundreds of millions of miles away, billions of miles away. You can't do a service call on them, but you have to be able to change in response to changing circumstances. And that's just a fundamental aspect of not just planetary probes, but Earth orbital spacecraft, of course, lots of systems here.
I think it's gone too far. So I'm a gamer, and when you get a new games console, you plug it in, and you basically have to spend about 8 hours before you can play the first game, because it needs to download a system update, which is usually 2 or 3 gig, and then you put the first game in, and then the game has an update. So it's basically ship now, patch later, and I think that's acceptable when you have a small spacecraft on the other side of the solar system. But I wish more software engineers would build things that work the first time out of the box. I think we've lost the sort of discipline to, and this is probably a good place to bring in Tom from HPE. What do you think about this? We've become lazy as software engineers, and we don't like, oh, whatever, we'll send a patch next week.
Did you want me to comment on, did we become lazy, or?
Well, let's start with that. Let's start with being lazy. Let's start with that. That's not too far.
First, let me say very quickly, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is thrilled to sponsor this event, and I'm very happy to be here with my colleagues as well. But I'm glad you asked me to comment on that, because in general, this notion of repairability, this notion of reconfigurability, as Jim mentioned, usually you have a trade-off in the function is fixed. And the initiative that we're going to announce today, which we call the Extreme Edge Initiative, or Project Extreme Edge, is building technologies that are faster than fixed technologies, but they also are reconfigurable on the fly. Now, that reconfigurability has two dimensions. The one you brought up, which is we call RAS, or reliability, availability, and serviceability, to reconfigure around issues. But secondly, also to reconfigure the actual mission workload algorithm that's being run in the event something goes wrong, in the event there's a unforeseen circumstance to accommodate.
So I think there's that all sounds, in general terms, like admirable things to do with computers, but you have a specific example to say, because you have a supercomputer on the space station at the moment.
We do.
So what's different about that compared with, because there's a bit of a joke that, the space shuttle had 386s in it.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, so what's different about that machine?
Well, it's a bit of an antimaty in the sense that we have the HPE Impala system, that happens to be its brand name, right on the spacecraft, but it has two interesting dimensions that at first don't sound necessarily like they come together. The first one is it's ordinary, open standard technology. And therefore,
Commercial off the shelf.
therefore it's the latest, it's the fastest. But secondly, we had to wrap it around with intellectual property and invention, and that's part of our value add here. And that invention around this open standard technology that does the compute engine is around the software hardening.
Right, so it's software hardening rather than hardware hardening. Now, I can imagine how hardware hardening works, where you, put some physical barrier between the processor, and then you test it for 10 years, and this is why you end up with 10-year-old processors.
Or redundancy.
Into space. So how do you do it in software? Can you really make up for cosmic rays zapping bits of your RAM?
We can by predictive analysis and by looking at things like memory leaks and resources being either failing or resources being used in an exhaustive way. And then being able to reprogram around them and to be able to also have redundancy built into the software. So we have, very frankly, on an NASA spacecraft right now, we have this.
And how's it working? Because I think it was launched a couple of months ago. Is it performing as well?
Well, right, there is not a failure, because failure is not an option. And also we have the...
It just goes slower or something, yes. Doesn't it? When it's hurried, then it clocks down or something?
Yes, if you allow me to say one other innovation is the way it interfaces with the power system. And there is an enclosure that we have built to cool it. We have to cool it, and there's not a lot of room on the spacecraft, obviously. So we have a lot of challenges, and we're pleased to work with NASA to bring this technology forward. But that's really just the precursor, Tom, into what we're doing with the Extreme Edge. We're literally building new technology and new chips that are not digital, and they're rather analog, meaning they're going to be faster. We don't have the switching time and the ones and zeros conversion needed to actually do these compute algorithms. And we're announcing as part of the Extreme Edge the dot product engine. Now, a dot product is a mathematical application, many of you know, and it is used in many high-performance calculations and high-performance computing calculations, scientific and engineering. But it does it the fastest we know, and when we do commercialize it, it should be the fastest. And we're combining that with our HPE Edgeline systems that we've already built for the Edge.
It's a kind of analog code processor.
It is. It's an accelerator, per se. The story gets better. It actually couples with a photonic communication system that helps the community.
It's fully buzzword compliant from the sound. What presumably there are algorithms that this is well suited for, and others. I mean, so what, machine learning and things like that, where is there a trade-off between speed and precision?
Yes, so we've manifested the buzzwords in reality right on the booth over there, so one can see the.
But you can see that it's all real and not just buzzwords.
It is. It's absolutely.
Go and check it out.
And therefore the notion that we were doing this to establish the extreme edges on Earth, which would be a smart city perhaps, or an autonomous vehicle, and an oil rig, and now we're taking it up a notch effectively, is calling it the extreme edge or sometimes the infinite edge, because what is farther out in space. And we believe that we have to be very independent, so the computing capability has to be there on the edge. The connectivity has to be there on the edge.
So the edge being the opposite of being in the middle in the cloud. So the idea then is that if you've got a Mars rover or a self-driving car, it can't be going back to the cloud to say, I got a problem, what do I do? It needs to have enough processing power locally to deal with whatever the problem is.
Yeah, how fast do you want to know in an autonomous car that there is a person ahead of you versus perhaps a plastic bag? And to know that image recognition. Well, now when you're out in space and you're talking about minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes from communication back to the Earth, we have to figure out ways to get compute in 3 dimensions: faster, lighter, and smaller, and then of course lower power, because there's not a lot of energy on a spacecraft. Or even when we jump to colonizing the planets and the extraterrestrial bodies, there's not going to be initially a lot of power there or a lot of space necessarily.
Let me just bring, before we go to Robin, let me just bring Jim in very quickly on that. So with, the rovers, for example, that are being designed now, I mean, there are already rovers that plan their own routes. They have a certain amount of autonomy. They decide which rocks not to crash into and so on. So will the availability of more recent hardware for all this works in those rovers allow them to do, much more exciting work?
Absolutely. I mean, right now, we deal in a world of long latency. It's the many minutes time lag back and forth to Mars. At the fastest, it's a little under 10 minutes. The slowest, maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes. And so we can't joystick these things. So they need onboard smarts. And even then, we still are in contact with them once a day. And so if they find some plastic bag on Mars, who knows, in a shopping cart, whatever, stop, take a picture of it, and phone home. And we basically will spend a 24-hour Earth day cycle figuring out what's going on. Give them more smarts, whether they're on orbit or on the surface or whatever, the ability to use pattern recognition, the ability to make decisions within the realm of safety, mission safety, and all that. It's absolutely it's a real hard limit right now.
If I could add real quick, 2 dimensions of that annihilation of latency from edge to Earth in this conversation. The first is we can do more things because we're doing them faster. So in the hour of the day, there's more to do. And secondly, we can respond quicker in a mission critical situation.
Cool. Well, we've talked. It sounds like the prospects are quite good for the offspring of Voyager and the current crop of robotic probes. That we're going to have smarter hardware that can do more stuff and is not quite so out of date when we launch it. But where does the human factor fit into this, Robin? Is our ability to support people in space progressing as quickly as the robotic technology seems to be?
Yes, I believe it is, and we're starting now with the International Space Station, which last week, by the way, celebrated 17 years of being continuously occupied by astronauts from the U.S. and international partners. So if you think about it, today's senior class or high school has never known a time when there haven't been humans living and working in space. So that's really incredible. Today on the space station, of course, we've been supporting that crew with regenerative life support systems and other systems to keep the crew healthy on board the space station, but we rely a lot on the supply chain from Earth. Fortunately, we have our commercial cargo vehicles supplying. We've got a launch coming up on Saturday for another mission to deliver cargo. So what we're trying to do, though, is we need to, in order to develop a sustained and continuous human presence out into the solar system, we need to break that supply chain. So we're using the space station today as a test bed to do that. And we're evolving the systems that we have supporting the crew today into the systems that we're going to need to venture into deep space using the space station.
So one of the particular areas of focus, I remember the live streaming of an astronaut eating some lettuce, which was kind of strangely, powerful, because this was a thing that had been growing off Earth and was being consumed off Earth. And, we're going to make this work, presumably we're going to have to do a whole story about that. But beyond lettuce, where are the focuses that NASA is?
Well, in the area of life support systems, today on the space station, we recycle about half of our oxygen from carbon dioxide. We've kind of closed our air loop halfway. We recycle 90% of our water. And so what we're trying to do is evolve that into a more closed-loop life support system, and which will take some new technologies, as well as, we're not developing a whole new life support system. We're evolving from what we have today, because one of the lessons that we learned is that it takes a while to develop that technology and prove it So our goal is to evolve what we have today on the space station into that system, and also run it for many years so that we can prove the reliability. Because even more than closing that loop, we need a reliable system, because once we close the hatch on the spacecraft going to Mars, that's what the crew has. The other technologies, the ability to do in-space manufacturing, so that if we do have failures, we can potentially reproduce parts that we need, and in-situ resource utilization, so we get to our destination, we can sort of live off the land. The plant biology, because the crew is going to need fresh, nutritious food along the journey, all of those technologies. And then the human research that we're doing on the space station today as well. You're familiar with our one-year crew and our twin study. All of that is looking at the risks for long-duration space flight on human, and ways to mitigate those risks when we go beyond low Earth orbit.
I understand you have something called the ISS National Lab, which is about trying to develop commercial markets. Jeff Bezos is very keen on this sci-fi vision of like manufacturing in space. What's the advantage of, what can you do in that environment that you can't do on Earth? What are the benefits of that?
So that's exactly what the other aspect of the space station. Not only are we using it as a test bed to enable future missions beyond low Earth orbit, but we're trying to open up low Earth orbit through the space station as a platform and the national lab to broad sectors of commercial markets to explore what can be done in microgravity, and how can it help businesses open markets not only in space but enhance their business on Earth. And we have a nonprofit, the Center for Advancement of Science and Space, or CASIS, that manages those national lab resources that we've set aside, which is 50% of the cargo, the volume, the space on the spacecraft, and the crew time to be able to operate those.
And what sorts of things are there? I remember last time I looked into this, it was things like you can grow crystals of microgravity that you couldn't grow on Earth. But what in practice is actually constrained by gravity that means you can do new things when you haven't gravity?
Yeah, all kinds of things. Exotic fiber manufacturing is something that we'll be investigating very soon. You mentioned protein crystal growth, pharmaceutical research. There's a lot of biological research going on in rodents and other model organisms.
And that's looking at the, is that specifically looking at the impact of microgravity on them, so that as a human analog?
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so ultimately that does feed into